All right, I think we will start and begin here. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Samantha Lay, and I have the privilege of serving as the president and CEO of the Seattle Southside Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us for today's Business Immigration and Employer Rights webinar. This session comes at a critical time. As immigration laws and enforcement priorities continue to shift, it's more important than ever that employers are equipped with clear, accurate, and timely information. This isn't just about compliance. It's about supporting your teams, protecting your business, and contributing to a stronger, more inclusive regional economy. Immigration policy touches every corner of our community, from small businesses and nonprofits to major employers and local governments. That's why we're so proud to partner with the American Business Immigration Coalition and the City of SeaTac to bring this important conversation directly to you. Our goal today is to provide practical tools, legal insights, and firsthand knowledge to you so you can continue to navigate these issues with confidence and compassion. Thank you again for being here and for your continued commitment to your workforce and our community. We are truly grateful for your leadership. And as we gather today, we respectfully acknowledge that our event is taking place on occupied Coast Salish land and that the Seattle Southside Chamber operates on the homelands of the Duwamish people. We pay respect to Coast Salish elders, past and present, and extend that respect to their descendants and to all Indigenous communities. This copyrighted webinar is presented by the Seattle Southside Chamber of Commerce and may not be reproduced or retransmitted in any form without the express written consent of the Chamber. And before we begin, we'd like to remind everyone that this session is being held in a press-free environment. This intentional decision helps create a space that is safe, respectful, and open to all participants, especially when discussing sensitive or complex topics like immigration and workplace policy. If you are attending on behalf of the media, we kindly ask you to exit this session at this time. Thank you for your cooperation and understanding. And we just have a few quick housekeeping items. Attendees will not be able to use their microphones or camera during this webinar. If you experience any technical issues, please use the chat box to connect with our support team. For speaker questions, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We'll address as many as time allows. Closed captions are available by selecting the CC button on your Zoom panel. And finally, this event is being recorded and a copy will be shared with all attendees following this session. Thank you again for joining us, and we're excited to get started. To help foster a respectful and inclusive environment, we'd like to share a brief code of conduct. Please keep all questions and comments professional, courteous, and relevant to today's topic. The chat and Q&A features are here to support constructive dialogue. Please refrain from personal attacks or disruptive behavior. Our team reserves the right to remove participants who do not adhere to these expectations. And we appreciate and thank you for helping us create a welcoming space for everyone here today. Now, here's what you can expect during today's session. After my welcoming remarks, the City of SeaTac, Alexander Yermaev, will share a few notes. Then followed by that, we have a presentation by the American Business Immigration Coalition with Connor Gallivan, and then we'll have a live Q&A. Following the Q&A, you will be provided with local resources to support your efforts. So let's get started. Next, I'm honored to introduce one of our key partners in today's event, the City of SeaTac, a leader in supporting economic development in our region. Joining us is Alexander Yermaev, Economic Development Manager for the City of SeaTac. Alexander plays a vital role in business growth, strategic partnerships, and ensuring local employers have access to the tools they need to thrive. Please note there are no slides for this portion, so I encourage you to listen closely and take notes of any resources shared. Please join me in welcoming Alexander.
And I'm not sure if people can see me yet. Good afternoon. Can you see me? Yes. Yep, here we go. I am now on the screen also. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alexander Yermaev. I am the Economic Development Manager for the city of SeaTac, and we are here to help the businesses in the city of SeaTac to thrive and navigate the various times we have upon us and had in the past, and ensure a good future and a good place to do business in the city of SeaTac. I would like to extend a thank you to every business owner who is here and who has chosen SeaTac as the home for your business, and encourage you to reach out to myself or others on this call as you navigate the environment, and look forward to connecting with you on that. We do have Human Services Division also present, I believe, on the call and as a resource to you and your employees. So please feel free to reach out to us directly for any support you may need from the city. As Samantha Lay mentioned, we do work very closely together with the Seattle Southside Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Small Business Development Center. And a couple of things to note for businesses is we have currently the Small Business Capital Access Program that ensures our businesses in SeaTac have access to good training for small business finances and preparation for accessing capital for your businesses. And we have a few partners helping us administer that program. So if you'd like to learn more about that, please reach out and we can include those links in the follow-up email after this webinar. As well as we have a home-based childcare program that is currently enrolling participants in the city of SeaTac. If you or someone you know is looking to open a childcare, home-based childcare in the city of SeaTac, that's a program that's currently up and operating, and they're recruiting participants. It's paid training, which is a great opportunity for folks who are interested in the field and would like to get trained for that program. So there are other resources we can help with and navigate in the city of SeaTac, and we are here to support you. So if you have any questions, please reach out to us directly. And as far as the links, we'll be making sure those are available and come out with the follow-up email from the Chamber of Commerce. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I'll stick around for Q&A later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexander. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker from the American Business Immigration Coalition, one of the leading national organizations advocating for practical and inclusive immigration policy. Joining us is Connor Gallivan, Midwest States Director of ABIC. Connor brings extensive experience working with the business leaders and elected officials and community partners to build smart immigration solutions. He'll be sharing key updates and practical insights to guide your organization in today's policy environment. Please join me in welcoming Connor.
All right, thank you so much, Samantha, for the introduction, and thank you everyone else for joining us today. Can I go ahead and share my screen here? Oh. Cool. So, hello everyone. So as Samantha said, my name is Connor Gallivan. I am the Midwest States Director here at the American Business Immigration Coalition. A little bit of background on us is we're a coalition of over 1,700 employers, business owners, business leaders, chambers of commerce, and business associations who are all organizing around common sense immigration solutions. Today, I'm here to share a presentation with you to discuss what the rights and responsibilities of employers are in this current environment, and what you can do to both protect yourself, your business, and your employees in the event of DHS enforcement actions. First thing I want to mention here, right off the top of the call, is I am not a lawyer, and this is not legal advice. Every single case is different, so please be sure to consult with a qualified attorney regarding your own specific cases. The goal of this presentation is pretty simple. We would like to give employers guidance to minimize any disruptions that could potentially occur in the event of DHS enforcement actions. We will be covering the primary methods, or the primary tools, I should say rather, that DHS has at their disposal. Things like I-9 audits, workplace raids, and Social Security no-match or mismatch letters, as well as what employers and employees should know about how to correctly fill out I-9s, how to make corrections on I-9s, conduct self-audits, as well as to what you can do to create a company-wide raid plan in the event of a worksite raid. So what are these primary tools that DHS has at their has at their disposal? The first one is an I-9 audit. This is typically when ICE will request to review an employer's I-9 forms, and an employer could potentially, or generally speaking, face fines and sometimes be required to enroll and verify if there are any issues or discrepancies found in these I-9 forms. The other primary tool that they have at their disposal are worksite raids. This is when ICE will, generally speaking, arrive at a worksite unannounced with the goal of trying to detain or arrest any individuals that they suspect are present in the United States without the proper authorization. The first thing we're going to discuss are going to be the I-9 audits and what you as an employer should know. The first and foremost thing is we would encourage everybody to take some time to do a self-audit, as well as to correct any Form I-9s that you currently have that need to make those corrections. On top of that, we suggest that you should make sure that you aren't keeping I-9s that you no longer need to keep. The basic rule of retention is that you should hold on to an I-9 for only as long as you're required to, which is 1 year, 1 full calendar year, after an employee's last day of work for pay. In the event that you are audited by ICE, you should also remember that you do not have to hand over all the requested documents immediately. You currently have a 72-hour window where you can audit those I-9s before you pass them over, make any corrections that need to be made, as well as to contact your employment attorney so that they know what's going on. You are given 72 hours. You will never be penalized for taking the 72 hours, so we would always suggest really taking that full 72 hours. On top of that, it is totally okay to request an extension if you are not able to gather said paperwork within that 72-hour window. We've seen DHS give employers upwards of a week to gather any paperwork before they are required to pass it over. Typically, as long as you're acting in good faith, DHS will be flexible and will work with you to make sure that you're able to deliver what they are asking. Next up, in this event, if this should happen to you, you want to make sure that you contact your employment immigration attorney immediately. They're the #1 person who's going to be able to help guide you through this process, make sure that you are doing everything that you're supposed to be doing it in the way that you're supposed to be doing it, as well as to give them a heads up so they can start working with you to build any defensive strategies that may need to occur, if it comes down to that. Additionally, you should only ever turn over the files that are requested. We've seen in the past employers want to show good faith of their businesses by handing over all of their employees' I-9s, even if they're only required to hand over a couple of them. We would not suggest this because it does give DHS the authority to then audit those I-9s and potentially make you pay fines if they do come across any issues on those I-9s. On top of that, you should always make copies of any documents that you plan on handing over to ICE before you hand them over. This is just to make sure that there's never going to be any discrepancy in what you believe you sent over to them and what they said they received. Moving on, we're going to discuss what a proper I-9 should look like and how to fill one out. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is section 1 of an I-9. This is the section that an employee, and specifically an employee, has to be the one that fills it out. As you can see, every single box in this section has been totally filled out with accurate information, with the date that corresponds with the date that it should be filled out on. This section 1, has to be completed on or before an employee's first day of work for pay. So the today's date, the box at the bottom right-hand corner there, should reflect that employee's first day of work for pay, or prior to their first day of work for pay. In the event that this was completed late, that's okay. You know, you could still potentially face a penalty for that, but you shouldn't, you know, lie and say that this was completed on a date that it wasn't completed. If it does get filled out late, put a note in there, indicate that you're aware that this wasn't completed on time, but make sure that it is, you know, accurate as to when it got filled out. On top of that, the only two boxes in this section that are not mandatory are the employee's email address and the employee's telephone number. Even though they're not required, however, we would still suggest making sure that your employees do complete those boxes, just because it will help you contact them in the event that a correction needs to be made in this section, as it will be the employee that actually needs to be the one that makes this correction. A couple, you know, common tips we'll see here too. Mistakes can occur in any one of these sections, but one of the more common ones that we see is actually the date of birth. In many cultures around the world, it's common to write dates in a day, month, year format, whereas in an I-9, it specifically has to be done in a month, date, year format. On top of that, we commonly see people do things like forget to put in their zip code. You know, make sure that if you as the employer are the one that are reviewing these, or that your managers, if they're the ones that are reviewing this, they know that they should take the time to review this entire section and make sure that every single box is filled out, and to double check to make sure that all the required items are filled in and that the employee signs and dates it at the correct, you know, location and time. Section 2. This is the section that the employer or manager has to be the one that fills out. Cannot be done by the employee, and is essentially where you will be listing out the documentation that your employee is using to verify both their identity as well as their workforce authorization. They do that by providing either an item from list A, something that proves both their identity and workforce authorization, a common example of this being a US passport, or they can provide a list B and a list C item. A common list B item, something that proves their identity, would be something like a driver's license or state/federally issued ID card, whereas a list C item is something that verifies their workforce authorization. A common example of this would be something like a birth certificate or social security card. This section needs to be completed and fully completed within the 3 first days of an employee's first day of work for pay. So it doesn't have to be completed on the first day of work for pay, but we still would suggest getting it done as soon as possible, as you only have like a 3-day window to get this done. On top of that, you know, as with the last section, the today's date should reflect the date that this thing was completed, not the date that you said it was completed. You always want to make sure that you are being as honest as possible on all these sections every single time you fill out an I-9 application. Additionally, we would suggest making sure that you keep records, photo records of every single piece of documentation that your employees give over to you when this section is being completed. There are some rules around that, however. If you do decide that you would like to keep, you know, copies of all of the employees' documents, you need to do that for all of your employees or none of your employees. You cannot pick and choose which of your employees you'd like to save documentation for. That's, you know, not the right thing to do, and it could potentially violate some labor rules. So you have to decide in the beginning whether or not you're gonna put in the time and effort to save everybody's documents, or if you're gonna save no one's documents. Now, if you haven't been saving people's documents in the past, but you would like to do so moving forward, or perhaps after this conversation we're having today here, that is okay, as long as you are consistent with saving every newly hired employee's documents moving forward. On top of that, if you know you are concerned with it, it's important to know too that you cannot retroactively go back to employees and ask them to resubmit their documents so that you can save a copy of it. If you've already accepted the application, you've already completed this section, and you didn't choose to save the documents, then you're kind of out of luck. Yeah, you know, you just kind of have to move forward. Another thing that we, would also like to mention here too is an employer or manager cannot dictate to the employee which kinds or what kinds of documents rather they are choosing to provide. If an employee decides that they would like to provide a list A item, like a passport, you are required to accept that form of documentation. If they choose to do a list B and list C item, then you have to accept that form of documentation. Also important to mention here too, and just a good thing for most people to understand, is that nobody expects employers to be forgery experts. And what I mean by this is you as an employer will never be penalized for having received a forged document if it was a document that any rational person would have believed to have been authentic. That being said, if somebody did something along the lines of, say, they tore a piece of paper out of a notebook and then wrote in crayon a list of numbers and then said that that was a social security card, well, I don't think any rational person would believe that that's an authentic document. So if you did accept that, you could potentially face some sort of penalties. So, good rule of thumb there. Also, last but not least, you want to make sure that your employer or manager, whoever it is that is filling this section out, does also take the time to double check everything, make sure that everything is accurately listed and that all the different sections are fully completed. Moving on to section 3. Now, section 3 is not a section that every single employee is going to have to deal with. This is also one that an employer or manager is going to have to be the one that fills out. It can't be the employee. And it's a section that you fill out in the event of re-verification or rehire. Essentially, this would include a returning hire or a rehire of somebody with a new visa, like an H-2A, H-2B, etc. And just like section 2, you want to make sure that every single thing is properly listed. Essentially, they're just going to be required to provide a list A item, something that proves their, workforce authorization and identity, or just a list C item, something that proves their workforce authorization. They do not actually have to, prove their identity anymore, as they should have done so in the previous section, section 2. They will not be required to provide a list B item. Now, to get a full list of all the available documents, or all the applicable documents, I should say rather, you can visit the USCIS website and you'll see the full list of everything that is acceptable for list A, list B, list C, right there when you print out an I-9 application. We would also encourage you to make sure that your employees have that same list when they're, when you're asking them to provide this documentation, so that they know exactly what they should be preparing. And moving on to corrections. It is more common than you'd probably think for there to be mistakes on an I-9. And it's okay for there to be mistakes on I-9s as long as you take the time to make corrections and make those corrections in the proper way. So the first and most important thing is who is making the correction in which part of an I-9 process, in which part of the I-9 application does matter. If the error is in section 1, the section that the employee was required to fill out, that correction needs to be made by that same employee. Whereas if there is an error in section 2 or 3, that error needs to be corrected specifically by the employer or manager. On top of that, the way to make a correction is simply by drawing a strike-through line through the incorrect information, writing the correct information above it, and then signing and then initialing and dating where that correction was made. You do not want to do something like scribble it out completely or use whiteout. And ideally, you haven't been using a pencil, so you shouldn't be able to erase it. It's just really simple. Draw a strike-through line, write the correct information above it, and then make sure that whoever made that correction puts their initials and date of when they made said correction. And again, if you are audited by DHS, you are given that 72-hour window. You can spend that 72-hour windows doing a self-audit of your I-9s, making sure that everything is completed correctly, and then making any necessary corrections that have to be made on it, as long as they are legitimate corrections. The reason we're talking about this is because, as you can see, there are quite a lot of consequences for not being compliant with Form I-9. And these typically take the form of fines, which can start off with a very reasonable, $676 per violation, and then upwards of $27,000 per a violation. The rate at which you get fined is typically determined by things like the size of your business, whether or not, DHS believes that you are acting in good faith, or, if you're making honest mistakes, or, potentially not, as well as, if there is a pattern of issues with these I-9s, or if it's maybe the first or second time you've only made an error like this. Another important thing to mention here is when I say per a violation, I mean per a violation. That is to say, if an employee say for example, they forget to put in their zip code in section 1, ding, that's a fine. If they forget to put in their zip code and they haven't put in their social security number, ding, ding, that's now 2 fines or 2 violations on the same application. So as you can see, these can really grow pretty quickly here, which is why it's really critical for you to take the time just to do a self-audit. It's super beneficial because most business owners just cannot deal with multiple, even smaller penalties like $676, but definitely not when they get to the more extreme event or of being hit with $27,000 fines. Next thing we're going to discuss is what to do in the event of an ICE raid and what you can do to ensure that you're following the law. Now, the first and most important part of this section is to understand the difference between administrative and judicial warrants. What you're looking at on the screen on the left-hand side is an example of an administrative warrant, whereas on the right-hand side, you're looking at a judicial warrant that has been signed by a federal judge. Now, both of these kinds of warrants do give ICE the authority to detain, investigate, or arrest an individual, but it is only the judicial warrant signed by a federal judge, the one on the right, that gives ICE agents the authority to enter a private domain like a business, a home, a car, etc., without your explicit consent. If ICE does show up at your worksite for whatever reason, the first thing that you want to do is confirm whether or not they have an administrative warrant or if they have a judicial warrant. If they only have an administrative warrant, you do not need to open up the door. You are not required to let them in. It's not your problem. You can just politely yet firmly ask them to come back with a judicial warrant if they want entry. Now, if they do have a judicial warrant signed by a federal judge, the first thing that you want to do is to look at what the scope of that warrant is going to allow them to do, which you'll typically see listed out in the top left-hand section of it. In this section, it should clearly list out exactly what address they would like to enter, what areas they would like to enter, and most importantly, if they have a specific individual that they would like to investigate, detain, and or arrest, that person's full completed name also has to be listed on that judicial warrant. Make sure you take the time that if they do have this, that you understand what the scope of that warrant is allowing them to do, and then to do everything you can to make sure that the agents only follow said scope of that warrant. Now onto the worksite raid plan itself. As I mentioned, the first thing you want to do is to confirm whether or not ICE has a judicial warrant or an administrative warrant. And you want to make sure that that the scope of this warrant is being followed. And you want to make sure that you and the agents are following the law by only opening up areas that they are legally authorized to enter. Now, what would be a legally authorized place to enter? Well, typically there's a difference between public spaces and private spaces. If it is something that is understood as a private space, they need to have that judicial warrant. But for some employers, like say, for example, restaurant owners, their place of business might have a kind of combination of both public spaces and private spaces. Say, for example, the dining hall being a public space available to the public, whereas the back of the house or the kitchen or maybe the manager's office would be understood as private locations. Now, ICE agents, just like any other patron, could go into a public space, like, the dining hall of a business. But if they're not patroning your restaurant and they do not have a judicial warrant signed by a federal judge that allows them to have the authority to enter that work site, you can always ask them to leave. If they're not patroning your business, they're just loitering, it's a public space, but if they're not, buying anything, you can ask them politely to leave. If they want to go into the kitchen or a private location, they have to have that judicial warrant. Next up in this worksite raid plan, you want to have a designated point person. This is the person who should be the singular one who communicates with the ICE agents during the duration of this raid. You want to make sure that you are truthful, and you want to make sure that you don't do anything that interferes with ICE activities, and to do everything you can to not escalate the situation. These can be incredibly traumatic incidents for everybody involved, and tensions are likely going to be high. You know, you would like to make sure that your point person is going to be someone who can help keep the temperatures calm, keep the employees cool, and to make sure that no one is doing anything to further antagonize these agents. Another thing that's kind of important to mention here is on interfering with agents, you know, in the event that they do have a judicial warrant signed by a federal judge and they do have somebody's name on it that they would like to talk to, you know, we totally understand that, you know, these could be your employees. These are people that you care about, people who are important to you, people that you might want to protect. You can't do anything that would impede the investigation or to impede, you know, what the scope of that warrant is doing. That will, and I promise you, just escalate the situation. It could potentially land you in hot water, the business in hot water, and even maybe make things worse for the person that they are, you know, currently looking for. So because of that, you know, you have to follow the law, let them follow the scope of that warrant, but do everything you can to make sure that they aren't extending their authority to places that they don't have the right to extend it to. Now for third-party work sites and contractors, you know, in the event that like an offsite work site gets raided, you want to direct agents to the contract company if you are using contractors. You aren't going to have those employees I-9s. It's going to be the contract company that has them. You should direct the ICE agents to those staffing companies. On top of that, you should also, if you are using a staffing company, make sure you take the time to confirm their compliance with any of the applicable laws, you know, in writing to your company. It's just a really good thing, you know, rule of thumb for you to do. Now, I mentioned this point person in the last slide. So who is this person? Well, the first and foremost is there should be at least one point person per shift per work site. This is the person that is going to be responsible for confirming whether or not ICE has a judicial warrant. They'll be responsible for being the only person that should be communicating with the investigating agents. And this person should also have the contact information for both, you know, management, the employer, as well as the business's legal counsel. That way, in the event that a raid's happening, the point person can get on the phone with the legal counsel right away and give them just live updates as to what's happening, to help the legal counsel just have as much perspective as possible. On top of that, this point person should be the one that's responsible for recording any badge numbers, agent names, and making as accurate of a record as possible of this entire interaction. What time did the agents arrive? How many were there? What kind of warrant did they have? Did they knock over a cup at some point? Everything that happened should be documented and then passed over to to your legal counsel as soon as possible. And if you are in a space where you can record this interaction in a way that doesn't, you know, make it more escalatory, we would totally suggest doing that. If you're able to record, perfect. And what's the action plan itself? Well, this person should first and foremost ask to see the warrant and request that ICE not come back with unless they have a warrant or a judicial warrant signed by a federal judge. You should make sure that you request a warrant before handing over any specific employee. You should make sure that you understand your right that you can both speak with and be represented by an attorney. You have the right to remain silent and to wait to sign any paperwork until after consulting with your attorney, even if they put pressure on you, which will sometimes happen. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to wait until you've had a chance to talk to your attorney. Please do that. On top of that, you want to make sure that you always take the full amount of time to gather any requested documents and to ensure that you're handing over all the necessary ones, and to never be afraid to request more time if you think you need it. Also, ask the agents to identify themselves with either a name or badge number, ideally both. And you want all the agents present to identify themselves, not just one or two, if you're able to. Next up, we're going to go over just what are some of your employees' rights in the event that this happens too. We would, very much make sure that that you do take the time to coach your employees on what their rights are, so that they know the best way to respond in the event of a worksite raid as well too. The first and foremost is they have the right to remain silent, but that right must be expressed. If somebody is being questioned and they want to invoke their right to remain silent, they can't just keep their mouth shut. They have to indicate that they are invoking their right to remain silent. Employees do not have to answer any questions about their immigration status, nationality, or place of birth. Employees also have a right to an attorney. Employees may refuse, and this is important, they may refuse to present any documents or identification that identifies or discloses their place of birth or country of nationality. And they also have the right to see an immigration judge if they have never been order removed or deported from the US in the past. If you want to, write this down somewhere, make sure all of your employees understand it, make sure that your managers understand it so they can coach folks through, make sure that your point person understands this so that they can guide, employees through this. The last thing that we're going to cover here, and this is going to be the most easy of the three, is what to do in the event of a Social Security no match and or mismatch letter. It's very simple. If you receive a letter in the mail that's a Social Security mismatch letter, you want to first shoot your legal counsel a call. It's always going to be the first step. Let them know that you received this, and then to do, exactly what this letter is asking you to do. In the event that you receive this letter will clearly indicate exactly what steps you need to follow. You just need to follow those exact steps verbatim, and just to make sure that you're working with your legal counsel so they can help you make sure that you're following all the steps completely and correctly. More important, however, is what you should not do, and that's take any adverse action against an employee simply for receiving a no match letter from the SSA, right? This could land you in hot water because it could make you liable for employment or labor law, as well as potential civil rights violations. The information that you receive from an SSA mismatch record or E-Verify does not make any statement regarding that employee or regarding that employee's immigration status. As a result, you should never take any adverse actions. Just follow whatever that letter is asking you to do, reach out to your legal counsel, and that's the end of it. So that concludes our presentation here. If folks have questions, if they look at the bottom of their screen, there's going to be a little Q&A box. Please put those questions right there. On top of that, you have my contact information right on the screen. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about who we at ABIC are or some of the work that we're engaged with, please feel free to reach out. If you have any questions that may come up after you leave this meeting today, also please feel free to reach out and we'll try to respond to your question as quickly as we possibly can. So with that, we'll go ahead and stop the presentation and we'll move on to the Q&A section.
Connor, thank you so much. Now that we're moving on to the Q&A section, again, if you have any questions for any of our speakers, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. This helps us keep organized and ensure we get to as many as possible. Please note that we will not be monitoring the chat for any questions, so be sure to submit it through the Q&A tab. If you need any technical support, our team is available through chat to support you. And yeah, to kick things off, Connor, can you share what is the most common mistake employers make when it comes to immigration compliance?
Yeah, it's absolutely in the I-9 section. It's more often than not just information being left out or just incorrectly written there, So it could be anything as small as somebody forgetting to put their zip code, writing a date in the wrong format, forgetting to put their signature at the bottom, things like that. And every single one of those infractions could result in a fine. So it really helps to take the time to just review everything before you accept an I-9 section, as well as to take some time afterwards to do a self-audit.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We have a few questions coming in. So just kind of starting from the top, if an I-9 form has expired for a current employee, do we need to complete a new I-9 for them? For example, a current employee was hired and onboarded maybe 10 years ago. The I-9 form says that they use has an expiration date of like 2017. Do they need to have the employee complete a new and most recent I-9 form?
So section 3 is the re-verification or rehire. That is going to be the section that you'd like to complete with them. But this could also be like a municipal or state level specific law. I would suggest consulting with your attorney too, just to make sure that that is the right thing to do.
Perfect, thank you. What are the best ways to keep record of I-9 documents?
Yeah, locked file cabinet for the original copies. Make sure that you make copies. If you can convert them into a PDF and then store them in a safe, computer somewhere, that's also something that would be suggested. You just want to make sure that they're going to be in a safe, dry, locked space. You want to keep the original documents if you can. You should make copies if you're able to, especially if you can make virtual copies.
Thank you. And what should they not do as far as
Just
record
like
keeping?
what? Yeah, no, I mean, you want to make sure that you should only keep the records that you are required to. So that is to say, you should only hold on to an employee's I-9 application for at most 1 full calendar year after their first day of work for pay. Also make sure that these, because understanding the differences between public and private spaces, make sure that these are in a private space. That's really, really important. And not just because you don't want ICE agents to have access to them without the proper warrant, but you also just don't want other employees having access to their colleagues' social security numbers and information, etc. So keep them in a secure place, or you don't want to have them in an insecure place, I should say rather.
Okay, thank you. And then where do you recommend folks, employers, getting the I-9 document and form?
If you go to the USCIS website, there's a section on that website where you can basically download the I-9 application. And when you download that I-9 application, it'll also have a list of all those applicable documents. So what constitutes as a valid document for list A, what can be accepted for list B and list C, and etc.
Thank you. And if the employer is using a cloud-based product for payroll, do they need to print and physically sign the I-9 form?
I know that the answer there is no. Like there are ways to kind of do that online signature. You probably shouldn't just type it though, right? Like there are tools that allow you to do virtual signatures, so you can use something like that. If there's a correction on one of those, or that needs to be made, you probably will want to print that out and then, physically do that correction. Which you can do either by just, if it's the employee that needs to make that correction, just have them print it out, draw that strike through line, do the initial and date at the top, take a picture of that, send it back, and then if there's an error in section 2, send to the manager or employer, whoever's responsibility is in your company to do that, and then have them do the same thing.
Thank you. And can you confirm that employers should be destroying employee I-9s after 1 year after their first date of hire, even if they're current employees? Or do they only destroy I-9 forms and documents of employees who have been terminated or departed?
Yeah, so you should keep an employee's I-9 document for as long as they are employed at your business, and for an additional full calendar year after their last day of work for pay. So if their last day was today, April 22nd, 2025, you would want to save that document no later than April 22nd, 2026.
Okay. And we have more questions about the I-9. For documents that support the I-9, like a passport, ID, or social security card, should employers keep a copy or not? And then what are the pros and cons of keeping a copy?
Absolutely. So we would absolutely suggest that you keep a copy. You're not required to. But it is important to also understand that you can't pick and choose which of your employees you'd like to save those documents for. You have to make the decision, either you're going to save copies for everyone or you're going to save copies for no one. And the pros and cons of it, I mean, there's really no cons of saving documents from your employees as long as you're doing it the correct and legal way. And that's everyone or no one. And only keeping those documents in a safe, secure place and dismantling them and disposing them after a year of that employee's last day of work for pay. The pros of which is, in the event of an audit, if an employee is being accused of, say, for example, passing along documentation that wasn't authentic, you will have a record of what you see or of what you received. And as I mentioned earlier, employers are never expected to be forgery experts. If it's a document that looks to a rational person like it's authentic, you will never be penalized if it turns out that that document is not authentic. That being said, again, if you receive something that's an obvious fake, right? I use the example of a torn out notebook page written in crayon. That's not going to be a legitimate document. That's not what social security cards look like. You could potentially face some repercussions if you do accept that.
Thank you. You mentioned that if you forgot documentation, you can't go back and can't retroactively ask. Can you give an example of what you mean?
So let's say after today's call, you've decided that you would like to start saving records of all of your employees' verification documents. So like a copy of their passport or a copy of their driver's license, for example. That is an okay thing to do as long as you are saving it for all newly hired or incoming employees. However, you cannot go back to an employee that you have already hired, whose I-9 application you've already essentially accepted it and completed, and say, hey, wait, I'd actually like you to bring your passport back so I can take a photo of it. You have to do it right there when they, have initially passed their documentation over to you.
Thank you. Another follow-up question on the I-9 is, should employers destroy copies of IDs and passports along with the I-9 after 1 year of their departure?
After 1 year of their last day of work for pay.
Thank you. Question regarding employees like request for a lawyer. Can an employee ask for a lawyer before showing any document to their employer?
Oh, to their employer or to
Mhm.
to an investigating agent?
I think to
I
their
guess,
employer.
yeah, I mean, they can absolutely ask to speak to a lawyer before they present any documents to an employer. Or an employee can ask to speak to a lawyer before they present anything to an employer. I don't know necessarily why you might want to. In the event there's a raid happening and an agent is, say, for example, asking them to sign something, they absolutely should wait until they've had a chance to speak with a lawyer.
Thank you. Question, if an employer receives a notice that an EAD has been terminated, is there somewhere to go to confirm that it's accurate?
I'm sorry, an EAD?
Let me look up that acronym.
It's the employment authorization document, EAD, or work permit.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anywhere that an employer can go to make sure that that an EAD has been terminated. That being said, if there was a termination there and they're, in the process of getting a new document, like a new visa, for example, they would want to fill out section 3 where you're doing the re-verification or rehire. On top of that, I believe that when you receive documentation, they'll have expiration dates on them. You'll want to make sure that you mark that down. It's also helpful to save records of everybody's documentation for the same reason. But I don't believe that you as an employer will be notified if somebody's paperwork has been essentially, I guess, revoked if in one way or another, unless that employee discloses it to you.
Thank you. One question, what if you don't have an I-9 record for any of your employees because you just learned about the form?
Yeah, that's okay. So it's always better to get them done late than never. So if you have employees that have not yet completed an I-9 application, you should make sure that they get those filled out as quickly as possible and do not lie about when they got filled out. It's always better to be honest and just be straight up front with DHS and say, hey, listen, made a mistake. Our employees filled this out late. They filled it out on this date. We understand. We're very sorry. You might still get a fine, but it probably won't be worse than that.
Thank you. Connor, can you share what are the resources for employees who have immigration, who don't have immigration legal counsel?
Yeah. So I believe that we'll be discussing some options that people have around Seattle and SeaTac a little bit later. I know that there's a bunch of really wonderful groups that help, say for example, provide low bono or no bono legal representation to immigrants, to undocumented folks, etc. A great example in Illinois would be the Resurrection Project, a group that we work really closely with. And I'm sure that there are many others, but I'm not sure who in Seattle, unfortunately.
Miriam, do you want to share a couple? I know that we will be talking about local services, but to answer this question.
Yeah, absolutely. The number one place where we direct folks is the Northwest Immigrants' Rights Project. We will be sharing these resources following this training as well, but they do offer free immigration legal defense for support for individuals who need that support.
Thank you, Miriam. And what's a proper way of handling a situation where the employer receives a letter of employment verification and the name isn't matching the social security number that they have on file?
Yeah, so if you've received an SSA mismatch letter, that letter is going to clearly instruct like exactly what steps you should follow. So step number one is going to be to contact your legal counsel just to let them know that you've received this letter, and they can just kind of help coach you through this process. And then step 2 through X will be exactly what is listed in this SSA mismatch letter.
Thank you. That is all the questions that I see in the Q&A. I do want to give it a minute just in case anyone is typing and close to submitting. But this is kind of a last call for questions.
And if people do have questions in the future, I'll make sure that my contact information is accessible to folks, so people can always shoot me an email, and we'll try to get that answer over to you as quickly as possible.
Wonderful. All right, I think we will move on to local resources. Thank you so much, Connor, for your insight and all the resources that you're providing. We wanted to highlight some local resources. So as we begin to close up today's program, we want to make sure that you walk away with not only being informed, but also equipped to help highlight local tools, services, and support systems available to business and community members. We are welcoming back Alexander and Miriam from the city of SeaTac, where they'll be sharing a brief overview of key resources you can tap in following today's session.
Thank you so much, Samantha. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's training. Know This Now, Immigration Updates for Employers, hosted by Seattle Southside Chamber of Commerce and facilitated by the American Business Immigration Coalition. My name is Miriam Iteri. I'm here on behalf of the city of SeaTac, where I serve as a human services coordinator. As Samantha stated, immigration policy touches on all areas of our community, from our local businesses and workforce to families and our neighborhoods. As changes continue to unfold at the national level, the City of SeaTac is committed to making sure our community feels informed and supported. We're grateful to the Chamber and ABIC for bringing this timely and important training to our region. And thank you for being here today and for your commitment to creating a welcoming and knowledgeable environment for all. So the City of SeaTac has compiled some resources, specifically our human services team. These resources are meant for not just you as employers, but more specifically your employees, the people that you serve. A question came up recently just around legal supports. Like I mentioned, there are legal defense funds. There's a big legal defense fund in the city of Seattle and neighboring cities that supports individuals who are low income and cannot afford support for themselves, cannot afford the legal services, knowing that those are very, very expensive. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick just to take a look at a couple of the resources that will be shared with you all. And so we've put together this resource list, which includes our City of SeaTac Human Services Resource Guide. There you'll find information for if anybody's experiencing an emergency, crisis, needs food assistance, rental assistance, medical, dental, health care, family support, basic needs, legal services, multicultural and immigrant services. All those are linked right there. We also have some Know Your Rights flyers from community partners, namely the Northwest Immigrants' Rights Project, as well as the Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network. They have some Know Your Rights flyers for community and have some scenarios around what to do if approached in public spaces, in private spaces such as your home, or in the workplace, including this flyer right here, what to do if immigration comes to your workplace. We also have this link here for Know Your Rights resources for immigrants, refugees, and advocates with the City of Seattle. Again, here you'll find information about immigration policy changes, local legal service providers, asylum-related resources, information about worksite raids, as well as family safety planning. I saw that there was a question around our families and kind of what to do. We have information here about family safety planning and also about a legislation here in Washington State called the Keep Washington Working Act in 2019. Essentially what it is, it's a law that was passed in 2019 that essentially sees our law enforcement not supporting immigration enforcement activities within the state. So it requires our police and our jails to change their practices to ensure that the privacy of all Washingtonians is protected in the event that any immigration officials would like information about our residents. We also have a guide linked for detained immigrants. So if immigrants do find themselves detained at the largest immigration detention site in the Northwest, called the Northwest Detention Center in Tacoma, this guide is very, very detailed and prepares families knowing what to do in the event that a loved one is detained. There's also information on bystanders and observers, and then also the Washington Deportation Defense Hotline. This is the first space to go to give them a call if you or somebody you know, a loved one, has been detained by ICE. And then lastly, this link is around just the family and community working together to protect themselves from the immigration raids. Some best practices are shared there. So again, we will be sharing this out after this training. If additional resources are needed or if any questions come up, the City of SeaTac remains available and ready to support you, whether it's through our Human Services team or our Economic Development team. We're looking to support both the business community as well as your employees to ensure that their families are safe and feel supported. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Miriam and Alexander. As we close out today's program, we want to thank you again for joining us today. And I want to take a moment to extend our sincerest thanks to our partners who made today's event possible. The American Business Immigration Coalition. Connor, thank you so much for your expertise, insights, and advice, answering our Q&A. The City of SeaTac for your resources and your continued support of this effort. I would be remiss if I did not highlight my team here at the Seattle Southside Chamber of Commerce, who provided technical supports and making sure that everyone had access to this program today. Your collaboration, your leadership, and commitment to employer education and support are truly appreciated. Together, we're building a more informed, resilient, and inclusive business community. And as we close today's program, I want to thank you, our attendees, for being with us today and for your commitment to staying informed on the issues that matter. We hope this session gave you practical tools and clarity on a topic that affects so many people in our region. Remember, you're not alone. If you have follow-up questions or need assistance, please feel free to call or email our team directly. We're here to support you. If you'd like to stay up to date on this topic and many other issues, please subscribe to our newsletters. We share regular updates on policy changes, events, and regional business resources. Thank you again for your leadership, again, your time, and your partnership. We look forward to staying connected and seeing you again very soon. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day.